Above everything else, good boards are highly conscious of the key responsibilities that they have, and they work very hard at exercising those in an exemplary fashion. The first of these responsibilities is what I would like to call the fiduciary responsibility, which they have towards their company's shareholders and other stakeholders. Their members act from the perspective that they hold the company in trust on behalf of others, and that this responsibility gives them what a colleague recently called and referred to as a particular burden of obligation. They are well aware that they do not own their job, and that for the duration of their mandates they are called to act as responsible caretakers. In their role as trustees, members of good boards are also well aware that they have to act reasonably, prudently, and in good faith, while respecting the rules embodied in the law and in ethical custom. Secondly, good boards invest significant time preparing for taking important people-related decisions. They take their responsibility to ensure the continued availability of the best possible top management for their companies very seriously. They know that their decisions to hire and, when necessary, to fire the CEO and other top management members have a major impact on their company's future. A lot of effort, therefore, goes into defining the qualities and skill profiles that are needed at the top of the company's organization, and in determining whether these needs can be met from internally developed talent pools or have to be recruited from outside. Good boards furthermore spend a lot of time on exercising their third important responsibility, reviewing and deciding on their company's strategy. They do this by bringing their independent judgment to bear on the options for future strategy, which top management has defined and presented to the board. Prior to deciding on the strategy, these boards also do a great job in what I would like to call checking and balancing the options that are presented, suggesting possible modifications wherever they consider this to be important. In order to perform their direction-setting role well, good boards build up a very solid understanding of the substance of their company, based on some significant knowledge of its results to date, its competitive position, its particular strengths and weaknesses, and its available opportunities, as well as the key threats it's facing. This understanding enables them to be an effective sparring partner for their top management during strategy review meetings. Good boards, in my experience, exercise these three aforementioned key responsibilities essentially in the same way in the European countries that I'm familiar with, despite the rather still different corporate laws and legal setups that these countries know for boards. For instance, a good supervisory board with workers' participation in Germany, or without it, like in the Netherlands, or a good board of directors with some top management amongst its members, like in France or in Belgium, or without them, as is the case in Switzerland. All these boards operate, in my experience, on these exercising of their responsibilities in much the same way.
Mr. van Rossum, there is an old saying that goes, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. You emphasize the importance of a good relationship to the CEO. But in these years, as far as I can see, the influence of the board is increasing, and sometimes that can be on the expense of the CEO. So how do you maintain the good relationship so the CEO sees you as friend and not foe?
You'll be a good board member because you ask good questions. That question you raise is probably one of the most difficult things to get right in a company. The balance between the board on the one hand and management on the other, or if you like, between the chairman of the board and the CEO. Very often, this balance doesn't work. I sort of alluded to it. You have a star performer as a CEO who says this board is not worth much, or you have exactly the opposite, where you have a sort of Sun King type chairman and everybody else sings Hosanna and the CEO is nowhere to be seen. To get that balance right is a subject that, at least in some of the boards that I'm on, you talk about for some hours in appointing the one or the other to the position. It is important that that pipeline between those two works effectively. And beyond everything else, if you don't have that one right, you can forget having a good governance setup, I would argue.
But all the way down to earth, how do you do that? How do you do it in the board when you have a CEO? What do you do?
Well, first of all, it's very important you get the CEO that you need. And given these changing times, and I'm sure there will be more subjects coming on this stage today that will tell you how different it is today versus even 4 or 5 years ago, that has implications for the type of CEO you need. In one bank that I'm familiar with, there was a sort of hierarchy of candidates, of CEOs waiting to succeed the CEO who was then 63, and I'm sure there was a candidate of 58, and a candidate of 55, and a candidate of 53, who all thought at some point in time they would sort of move up, if only they would be patient. The guy that was elected was a guy of 45 years old, and in this case not even a national from the country that the bank was in.
A wall.
And that was therefore a revolution. Yeah. At the same time, this had implications for the chairman change, which happened the next year, which was modeled almost on getting the balance right with the CEO that was just elected. And it was therefore a two-way street. And I can only argue that that's the way to do it, is look carefully at the CEO you have and try to fit a proper chairman with it, and vice versa, depending on the time you have at the time and the opportunity to elect.
Yeah, because let's stay on the question of power relations. One of Denmark's most well-known businessmen, Fritz Schur, he's the chairman of one of the state-owned companies, Dong, and of SAS. We all know this, you know them of course. And he has put the following label on some of the Danish board members. They are invisible, they lack fundamental self-acknowledgement, and they care more about prestige than about their work. Some words, but how could you recognize some of these words when you look on international boards?
Yeah, I'm tempted, if that's true, that statement, I'm tempted to say to Danish board members, wake up. Wake up, because times have changed, and it's an incredibly different environment out there than it was maybe when you were in a more executive role or in another occupation. The board has a real role. I'm maybe sitting on 4 or 5 of them in a couple of countries. It takes me, my wife says to me regularly that he thought that I had retired. I spend probably, whatever, 2/3 or 80% of my time sitting on boards. I don't have the daily stress in the sense that the CEO has, but I have lots of things to do and to read and to talk about, and to sort of bring to the party. I think it's very important that you open your eyes to what's happening around us and in the rest of the world. If I can give one little anecdote, I remember when I was a CEO in early 2000, in fact it was 1999, I was in China and I was invited for a day opening of a bank branch in Chongqing. And to be quite frank to you, in 1999 I did not know where Chongqing was. And I just didn't even look on the map. I got on the plane in the morning and they said it's only for the lunch, and then I had to come back in the afternoon. And I was sitting next to the burgomaster of Chongqing at the lunch that was given for this opening of this bank branch there. Lots of people, and I was about to ask him how many people were living in his, and I wanted to say village. Fortunately, I said how many people live here, and the answer was 26 million at the time. And this was a city right in the middle of China that I had never heard about, and I then figured out that there were 20 more of these places of more than 25 million inhabitants. I'm living in Brussels, and I'm Dutch. You take the whole of the Benelux, and you don't even come to 16 million. And believe me, the activity that is being generated through the cities in China and through other mega cities in the world is just incredible, even for small and medium-sized companies, and not only for big global companies. So wake up.